What could possibly cause Satan to challenge the faith of a human being? This question goes deeper than it first appears. It is not simply a theological curiosity or an ancient philosophical debate. It reaches into the very core of the human heart. Why do people believe in God? Is faith built on genuine love for the Creator? Or is it sustained by the blessings people receive from Him? If prosperity disappears, if health fails, if the stability of life suddenly collapses, will faith still remain? For thousands of years, this question has echoed through human history. And within the pages of the Bible, it is presented in one of the most dramatic and profound stories ever written. The story of a man named Job. Many people know Job as a symbol of patience. His name has become almost synonymous with endurance in suffering. When people think of Job, they often think about a righteous man who remained faithful even while facing unimaginable loss. But if that is all we see in his story, then we may be missing something far deeper. The story of Job is not simply about suffering. It is not merely a lesson about perseverance. Hidden within it is a profound spiritual secret, one that has the power to transform the way believers understand faith, suffering, and their relationship with God. This secret is not obvious at first glance. Many readers see the tragedies that struck Job. They see the destruction of his wealth, the death of his children, the agony of his illness, and the accusations of his friends. Yet they fail to notice what was happening within Job himself, because Job's secret was not something he learned like a lesson in a classroom. It was not a religious formula he memorized or a doctrine he simply accepted. Job's secret was something deeper than knowledge. It was something he became. To understand this secret, we must travel back to the beginning of the story. Before the storms of suffering arrived, before loss entered his life, before heaven and hell turned their attention toward him. The story begins in an ancient land far to the east, under a blazing desert sky where caravans of camels crossed endless sands and wealthy landowners managed vast flocks and herds. In that distant place lived a man whose reputation was known throughout the region. He was not a king. He was not a warrior or a conqueror. Yet he was respected more than many rulers thought. His name was Job. And before the tragedy that would one day shake his life to its core, Job was living a life that appeared almost perfect. But that perfection would soon become the stage for one of the greatest spiritual confrontations ever recorded. Before suffering ever touched his life, Job was known as one of the most respected and honored men in the entire Eastern world. The Bible describes him with words that carry extraordinary weight. It says he was blameless and upright, a man who feared God and turned away from evil. These descriptions were not casual compliments. They were a profound testimony about the character of a man whose integrity shaped every part of his life. Job was not righteous merely in appearance. He was not a man who performed religious rituals in public while living differently in private. His life reflected a deep and genuine reverence for God. His fear of God was not based on superstition. It was not the fear of someone trying to avoid punishment. Instead, it was the reverent awe of someone who recognized the greatness, holiness, and authority of the Creator. Because of this, Job deliberately turned away from evil. He avoided actions that would dishonor God, not simply because they were forbidden, but because he truly desired to live a life that pleased the One who had given him everything. At the same time, Job was also incredibly wealthy. In the ancient world, wealth was often measured in livestock and agricultural resources. By those standards, Job was extraordinarily prosperous. He owned 7,000 sheep grazing across the hills. He possessed 3,000 camels that likely participated in the trade routes crossing the deserts. He had 500 yoke of oxen used for plowing fields and 500 female donkeys. In addition to these animals, he had a large number of servants who managed his household and oversaw his vast operations. All of this made Job the greatest man among the people of the East. But his greatness was not only measured in wealth. Job also had a thriving and joyful family. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters, forming a household filled with life and celebration. His children maintained close relationships with one another. They regularly gathered in one another's homes for feasts and celebrations, inviting their brothers and sisters to share meals together. This detail reveals something beautiful about Job's family. It suggests unity, affection, and harmony among his children, something that often reflects the character and leadership of a father. From every outward perspective, Job's life looked complete. He had wealth, influence, respect, a strong family, and a vibrant spiritual life. But the true depth of Job's faith could be seen in something even more subtle. There is a small detail in the story of Job that reveals the remarkable nature of his spiritual life. It may seem minor at first, but it provides one of the earliest clues to the secret hidden in his story. Whenever his children finished their cycles of feasting and celebration, Job would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings to God on behalf of each of them. This action was deeply significant. Job did not wait until he knew his children had sinned. He did not wait for evidence of wrongdoing. Instead, he acted out of a concern that perhaps somewhere within their hearts, they might have unintentionally dishonored God. In other words, Job prayed and sacrificed not only for sins that were visible, but even for sins that might exist only in thought. This reveals something extraordinary about his spiritual awareness. Job practiced what could be described as preventative righteousness. His relationship with God was not occasional or superficial. It was constant. He lived with an ongoing awareness that God was present in every aspect of life, within his home, within his family, within the thoughts and attitudes of the human heart. Because of this, Job did not treat faith as a ritual reserved for special occasions. Faith was the atmosphere of his life. He spoke to God regularly. He interceded for others. He carried a deep sense of responsibility for the spiritual well-being of his family. This kind of devotion reveals that Job's faith was not fragile. It was not built on appearances or social expectations. It was rooted in a genuine relationship with God. And yet, despite this remarkable faith, something extraordinary was about to happen. Unseen by Job, events were beginning to unfold in the heavenly realm. A conversation was about to take place that would transform his life forever. Because the story of Job was never simply about one man's suffering. It was about a question that heaven itself was asking. Can a human being truly love God for who he is, or only for what he gives? And Job, without realizing it, was about to become the answer. While Job continued living his life in integrity on earth, caring for his family, managing his wealth, and maintaining his faithful devotion to God, Something extraordinary was taking place beyond the limits of human sight. The story of Job suddenly shifts from the quiet land where he lived to the throne room of heaven itself. In this unseen realm, a gathering was taking place. The sons of God, heavenly beings, came to present themselves before the Lord. Among them, another figure appeared as well, one whose presence carried a very different purpose. Satan had arrived. The name Satan literally means the adversary or the accuser. His role is not simply to observe humanity, but to oppose it, to search for weaknesses, to challenge the sincerity of human faith. According to the biblical narrative, Satan had been roaming throughout the earth, watching human behavior, studying the patterns of human belief and motivation. Then God spoke to him, "Where have you come from?" Satan answered that he had been moving throughout the earth, walking back and forth across it. The answer suggested something important about his nature. He was constantly searching, constantly analyzing, constantly looking for opportunities to accuse or destroy. Then the conversation took an unexpected turn. God said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job?" This question is one of the most striking moments in the entire story. God himself draws attention to Job. Rather than hiding Job from the enemy, God presents him as an example. "Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth? A blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil." These words are remarkable because they reveal God's complete confidence in Job's character. Job was not simply seen as a faithful believer among many others. In God's own words, there was no one else like him on the earth. This moment reveals something profound. Job's life had become more than just his personal story. Without realizing it, he had become an example, a living testimony about what a human being could become when their life was shaped by reverence for God. In that moment, Job represented all humanity. The conversation in heaven was no longer simply about one man. It had become a question about the nature of faith itself. But Satan was not impressed. When Satan heard God praise Job, he immediately launched an accusation. His response cut straight to the deepest question about human motivation. Does Job fear God for nothing? In other words, Satan suggested that Job's faith was not genuine at all. According to him, Job was faithful only because his life was comfortable. Satan continued his argument. "Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased throughout the land." In Satan's view, Job's devotion was simply a transaction. God had given Job wealth, protection, and prosperity, and in return, Job served him. According to this accusation, remove the blessings and the faith would disappear. Then Satan presented his challenge, "But stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face." This statement introduced one of the most dangerous ideas ever proposed about human faith. Satan claimed that human beings cannot truly love God for who he is. According to him, every act of worship is ultimately driven by self-interest. People serve God because they benefit from doing so. If the benefits vanish, so will their loyalty. This accusation was not only about Job. It was about every believer who had ever lived. Can a human being truly love God simply because he is God? Or is every expression of faith secretly motivated by blessings, protection, and personal advantage? To answer that question, Job's life was about to become the battlefield of a cosmic test. God responded to Satan's challenge with a surprising decision. "Very well," he said, "everything he has is in your power, but do not lay a hand on the man himself." With that, Satan departed from the presence of God. The test had begun. Back on earth, Job had no idea that this conversation had ever taken place. He did not know about Satan's accusation, and he did not know that his faith had become the center of a spiritual conflict unfolding in heaven. For him, life still appeared normal. But in a single day, everything would change. The disasters did not arrive slowly. They came suddenly and violently, one after another, in a devastating sequence designed to overwhelm him completely. The first messenger arrived with terrible news. Job's oxen had been plowing in the fields, and the donkeys were grazing nearby when a group of raiders, the Sabeans, suddenly attacked. They stole the animals and killed the servants who were tending them. Only one servant survived to escape and bring the news. But before Job could even respond, another messenger arrived. This time, the disaster seemed even more mysterious and terrifying. Fire had fallen from the sky, consuming the sheep and the servants who were caring for them. Thousands of animals, representing a massive portion of Job's wealth, were destroyed instantly. Again, only one servant survived to report what had happened. While that messenger was still speaking, a third arrived. This time, the attackers were the Chaldeans. They had organized themselves into raiding groups and swept in to steal Job's camels. The servants who tried to protect them were struck down with swords. Once again, only one person escaped to tell the story. In just a matter of minutes, Job had lost enormous portions of his wealth. Entire herds and flocks built over many years of work and stewardship had vanished, but the worst news was still coming. While the third messenger was still speaking, a fourth appeared. His voice carried the most devastating message of all. Job's sons and daughters had been gathered together in the home of the eldest brother, enjoying a meal and celebrating together. Then suddenly, a powerful wind swept across the desert. The wind struck the house with such force that it collapsed. The building fell upon everyone inside. All 10 of Job's children were killed. In a single moment, the joy of Job's household, the laughter of his sons and daughters, the future of his family, the hope of generations yet to come, was buried beneath the rubble. Only one servant survived to bring the news. The sequence of these disasters reveals something chilling about Satan's sobrang strategy. The tragedies were not random. They were carefully arranged. Each messenger arrived while the previous one was still speaking. Each report delivered another blow before Job had time to process the last one. First, the oxen and donkeys, then the sheep, then the camels, and finally the children. The attacks escalated step by step, increasing in emotional impact with every message. It was a psychological assault designed to shatter Job's faith completely. Within a single day, the greatest man of the East was transformed into a man who had lost almost everything. His wealth was gone. His servants were dead. His children were gone. The life he had built over decades had collapsed in a matter of minutes. And now the entire universe seemed to wait for the same question that Satan had asked in heaven. What will Job do now? Will he curse God, or will his faith remain? After the final messenger delivered the devastating news, silence must have fallen over the place where Job stood. In the span of only a few moments, his entire world had collapsed. The wealth that had taken decades to build was gone. The servants who had worked alongside him were dead. Most painfully of all, the 10 children who filled his home with laughter and life were suddenly gone. No parent can easily imagine such loss. The future that Job once saw stretching before him, watching his sons grow into leaders, seeing his daughters build families of their own, had vanished in a single day. The house that once echoed with celebration now stood empty. Everyone who heard the reports must have expected the same reaction. After such unbearable tragedy, most people would scream in anger, collapse in despair, or turn their bitterness toward God. But what Job did next shocked both heaven and earth. The first thing Job did was express grief. He tore his robe and shaved his head, actions that in the ancient world symbolized deep mourning. These were not signs of weakness, but honest expressions of sorrow. Job did not pretend that nothing had happened. He did not suppress the pain that was tearing through his heart. He acknowledged the reality of his loss. But then something even more remarkable happened. Job fell to the ground, and he worshipped at the very moment when Satan expected anger. When despair seemed inevitable, Job turned toward God instead of away from him. His voice spoke words that would echo through centuries of faith. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. These words reveal the depth of Job's understanding of God. Job recognized that everything he possessed had always been a gift. His wealth had been a gift. His children had been a gift. Even his own life was a gift. And if those gifts had been taken away, it did not mean that God had ceased to be worthy of worship. This is one of the most powerful moments in the entire story. Job did not say that he understood what had happened. He did not claim that the suffering made sense. There was no explanation for the tragedies that had struck him. From his perspective, the disasters must have seemed random and cruel. Yet he worshipped anyway. His faith did not depend on explanations. It did not require immediate answers. Instead, it rested on a deeper conviction that God remained sovereign and worthy of honor regardless of circumstances. In that moment, Job demonstrated something extraordinary. His relationship with God was not based merely on blessings. It was rooted in trust. And so the first test ended with a statement that surprised even the spiritual forces watching from heaven. In all this, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. But the story was not finished. Satan had one more argument to make. Once again, the heavenly court assembled before God, and once again, Satan appeared among them. God asked him the same question as before, where he had come from. Satan answered that he had been roaming throughout the earth. Then God pointed again to Job. Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and turns away from evil. And he still maintains his integrity, even though you incited me against him to ruin him without cause. The statement revealed that Job had passed the first test. Despite losing everything, he had remained faithful. But Satan was not ready to admit defeat. He responded with a darker accusation. Skin for skin, a man will give all he has for his own life. But stretch out your hand and strike his flesh and bones, and he will surely curse you to your face. According to Satan's reasoning, Job had endured the loss of his possessions only because his own body had remained untouched. Wealth could be replaced, but personal suffering would break him. This time, the test would become even more personal. God permitted Satan to afflict Job's body, but once again, he set a boundary. You may strike his flesh, but you must spare his life. And so Satan left the presence of God and carried out his second attack. Soon after, Job's body became covered with painful sores from the soles of his feet to the top of his head. The disease was severe and humiliating. His skin burned and cracked. The itching and pain were relentless. His once strong and respected appearance deteriorated until he became almost unrecognizable. He sat among ashes, scraping his wounds with broken pieces of pottery in a desperate attempt to relieve the pain. The man who once commanded vast estates now sat alone in the dust. Then another painful moment occurred. Job's wife, overwhelmed by grief and unable to bear the suffering she saw before her, spoke words that revealed her despair. Do you still hold on to your integrity? Curse God and die. Her words may sound harsh, but they came from a heart shattered by loss. She too had buried 10 children. She too had watched her life collapse. From her perspective, death seemed like the only escape from such suffering. But Job answered her with calm conviction. You speak as one of the foolish women speaks. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble? Job did not insult his wife, but he firmly rejected her advice. His reasoning was simple yet profound. If God had given them blessings in the past, why should they refuse hardship when it arrived? Again, the narrative repeats the same powerful conclusion. In all this, Job did not sin in what he said. Even while suffering physically, Job's faith remained unbroken. News of Job's tragedy soon spread throughout the surrounding regions. His suffering was so great that it could not remain hidden. When 3 of his closest friends heard about everything that had happened, they decided to come and comfort him. Their names were Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. These men were not enemies. They were respected leaders from their own communities, and they genuinely intended to support Job during his time of crisis. They traveled long distances to visit him, hoping to bring comfort and understanding. But when they finally saw him from a distance, they could hardly recognize him. The once dignified and prosperous man they remembered was now sitting in ashes, his body covered in sores, his appearance distorted by suffering. The sight overwhelmed them. They began to weep aloud. They tore their robes and threw dust into the air as a sign of mourning. Then they came and sat down with Job on the ground. For 7 days and 7 nights they said nothing. They simply sat beside him in silence. This was perhaps the wisest thing they would ever do. Their silence acknowledged something important. Some suffering is too deep for words. Sometimes, the greatest comfort a person can offer is not explanation, but presence. During those 7 days, they shared Job's grief without attempting to solve it. They mourned with him, recognizing the depth of his pain. If the story had ended there, these 3 friends might have been remembered as extraordinary examples of compassion. But eventually, the silence ended, and when they began to speak, everything changed. Instead of offering comfort, they began to offer explanations. One by one, they delivered long speeches about suffering, justice, and the ways of God. Their conclusion was simple. The innocent do not suffer like this. For Job must have sinned. According to their reasoning, God always rewards righteousness and punishes wrongdoing. If Job's life had collapsed so completely, then there must be a hidden sin somewhere in his life. In other words, they transformed Job's suffering into a courtroom. Instead of sitting beside a grieving friend, they began defending their theology, and in doing so, they made a tragic mistake. They chose to protect their ideas about God rather than care for the human being who was suffering right in front of them. As the conversations between Job and his three friends continued, the emotional weight of his suffering began to surface more openly. At first, Job had responded to tragedy with remarkable strength. He worshipped God even when everything had been taken from him. He endured physical agony without abandoning his faith. But suffering that lasts long enough eventually reaches deeper layers of the human heart. After days of silence and the painful speeches from his friends, Job finally broke the quiet with words that revealed the depth of his inner turmoil. Instead of cursing God, as Satan had predicted, Job cursed the day he was born. "May the day of my birth perish," he said. These words were not spoken in rebellion against God, but in overwhelming sorrow. Job wished that the day he entered the world had never existed. In his anguish, he wondered why he had been allowed to live only to experience such devastating loss. He asked questions that countless suffering people have asked throughout history. Why is life given to someone whose path is filled with pain? Why does God allow a person to see the light of day if that life will later be swallowed by darkness? Job's speeches during this period reveal a man wrestling honestly with grief. He did not pretend to be strong when he felt weak. He did not hide his confusion behind religious language. Instead, he spoke openly about the questions that troubled his heart. At times, Job even felt as if God himself had turned against him. From Job's perspective, every part of his life had collapsed. His health was gone, his children were gone, his reputation was shattered, even his friends had become his accusers. In the middle of that darkness, it seemed to him that God was no longer protecting him, but attacking him. Yet something extraordinary remained beneath all of that pain. Job never cursed God. Satan's prediction still had not come true. Even in his deepest moments of despair, Job continued directing his words toward God rather than turning away from him. His faith was wounded, but it was still alive. And in one of the most powerful declarations in the entire book, Job spoke words that revealed the spark of hope that had not been extinguished. "I know that my Redeemer lives." This statement stands like a bright light in the middle of a dark night. Job did not understand why he was suffering. He did not know about the heavenly conversation that had taken place. He could not see any clear purpose behind his pain, but he believed that somewhere beyond his present circumstances, there was a Redeemer who was still alive, someone who would ultimately stand for him, someone who would bring justice and restoration in the end. This was faith in its purest form, not faith based on visible blessings. Not faith sustained by comfortable circumstances, but faith that survives even when the night feels endless. For Job, belief in God was no longer connected to prosperity or security. It had become something deeper, a trust that remained even when life no longer made sense. This is why Job's story continues to speak to believers across centuries. It shows that true faith is not the absence of questions. It is the willingness to keep trusting God even while the questions remain unanswered. But the long debate between Job and his friends was about to reach its turning point. After 37 chapters of arguments, accusations, and emotional cries for explanation, something extraordinary finally happened. God Himself appeared. For a long time, God had remained silent. Job had spoken, his friends had spoken, each side had presented arguments about justice, suffering, and the nature of God. The debates had grown longer and more intense as each person tried to explain why Job was suffering. But throughout all those speeches, God had not intervened. Then suddenly, everything changed. A storm began to rise. Out of the whirlwind, the voice of God finally spoke. Kasi the momentum must have been overwhelming. Tasinig na kang God, kung pa created it at the universe, the one who governs the stars and commands the oceans, was now addressing Job directly. For all those chapters, Job had been asking God questions. Why had this happened? Why was he suffering if he had lived faithfully? Why did God allow the righteous to endure such pain? But when God finally spoke, He did something unexpected. He did not answer Job's questions. Instead, God began asking questions of His own. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? With that single question, God shifted the entire perspective of the conversation. He continued asking, who determined the measurements of the earth? Who shut in the sea behind its doors when it burst forth? Who commands the morning and causes the dawn to appear? Who stores the snow and directs the lightning? Who provides food for the lions and the ravens? Question after question poured out like waves from the storm. God spoke about the creation of the world, the power of the oceans, the movements of the stars, the birth of animals in the wilderness, and the mysterious forces that govern nature. Each question revealed the vast difference between divine knowledge and human understanding. Job had been asking for an explanation of his suffering, but God showed him something even more important. The universe is far more complex than the human mind can grasp. The systems that govern creation stretch far beyond what any person can fully comprehend. If humans cannot fully understand how the oceans move, how the stars travel through space, or how life emerges in the wilderness, how could they expect to understand every detail of God's plans? The message was not meant to humiliate Job. Instead, it invited him to see a greater reality. God was reminding Job that the same wisdom that designed the universe was still governing his life, even when that wisdom remained hidden from human eyes. In other words, the absence of explanation does not mean the absence of purpose. Humans see only a small portion of reality. God sees the entire story from beginning to end, and that realization would soon lead Job to one of the most profound moments of humility and transformation in the entire Bible. After God finished speaking from the storm, the atmosphere must have been completely different from before. For dozens of chapters, the conversation had been dominated by human voices. Job's cries of pain, his friends' arguments, and their attempts to explain the mystery of suffering. Each person believed they understood something important about God. But when God Himself spoke, everything changed. The overwhelming power of His words revealed how small human understanding really is. The questions about the foundations of the earth, the movement of the seas, the birth of wild animals, and the hidden laws of the universe showed Job something he had never fully realized before. God was not simply powerful. God was infinitely wise. And in comparison to that wisdom, human knowledge, even the knowledge of the most righteous man on earth, was limited. Job finally responded, but this time his words were very different from the speeches he had given earlier. The tone of accusation and confusion was gone. In its place was humility. "I know that you can do all things," Job said, "and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted." In that moment, Job acknowledged something profound. Even though he did not understand the reasons for his suffering, God's plans were still perfect. Nothing that had happened to him had escaped God's awareness or control. Then Job spoke the words that many readers consider the turning point of the entire story. "Surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know." These words were not an admission of guilt for secret sin, as his friends had accused him. Instead, they were a recognition that God's ways extend far beyond the limits of human reasoning. Job had spent chapter after chapter asking for answers, but now he realized that the greatest answer was not an explanation, it was an encounter. Then came the most powerful declaration in the book. "Before, my ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you." This statement reveals the deepest transformation that had taken place in Job's life. Before all these events, Job already believed in God. He feared God, honored Him, and lived a life of integrity. God Himself had declared that there was no one like Job on the earth. Yet even that deep faith had been based largely on what Job had heard and learned about God. Now everything had changed. Through suffering, questions, confusion, and finally a direct encounter with the voice of God, Job had moved from knowing about God to truly experiencing Him. This is the hidden secret of Job's story. The greatest purpose of the trials was not punishment, it was transformation. Before the suffering, Job's faith was strong, but after the encounter with God, his faith became deeper than ever before. It was no longer simply belief in God's goodness during good times. It had become a personal relationship forged in the fires of adversity. Job had discovered something that many believers spend their entire lives searching for. There's a difference between hearing about God and meeting Him. Hearing about God can shape beliefs, but encountering God changes a person forever. And that realization became the climax of the entire story. Job no longer needed an explanation for every event that had taken place. The presence of God was enough. After Job spoke these words of humility, the story entered its final stage, one that revealed another surprising dimension of God's character. God turned His attention to Job's three friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. Throughout their long speeches, these men had tried to defend what they believed was correct theology. They insisted that God always rewards the righteous and punishes the wicked. Because Job had suffered so severely, they concluded that he must have committed some hidden sin. But God declared that their conclusions were wrong. "You have not spoken the truth about me, as my servant Job has." This must have shocked them. The men who believed they were defending God had actually misrepresented Him. In their effort to protect their religious system, they had ignored the reality of Job's suffering and wrongly accused a faithful man. God then instructed them to bring sacrifices and asked Job to pray for them. This moment is one of the most remarkable parts of the entire narrative. The man they had accused, criticized, and judged was now the one who would intercede on their behalf. Job could have refused, He could have reminded them of their harsh words and their lack of compassion. He could have allowed them to face God's correction without helping them. But instead, Job did something extraordinary. He prayed for them. The same man who had endured unimaginable suffering chose forgiveness over resentment. Instead of holding on to the pain they had caused him, he lifted them up before God in prayer. This act revealed the final stage of Job's transformation. Suffering had not hardened his heart. It had purified it. And the Bible records something very significant. The Lord restored Job's fortunes when he prayed for his friends. The restoration did not begin when Job defended himself. It began when he forgave others. After this moment, God blessed Job's life again in extraordinary ways. His wealth was restored and even doubled. The flocks and herds that had once been lost were replaced with greater abundance. Job also received a new family. He and his wife had 10 more children, 7 sons and 3 daughters. The Bible even notes that his daughters were among the most beautiful women in the land, and Job granted them an inheritance alongside their brothers, something rare and generous in that culture. Then Job lived for another 140 years. He saw his children, his grandchildren, and even his great-grandchildren. The man who once sat in ashes and sorrow eventually experienced decades of peace and renewed joy. The story closes with a quiet but powerful statement. And so Job died, old and full of years. But the true legacy of Job is not simply that they restored wealth or long life. It is the secret his story reveals. Faith is not proven when life is easy. Faith is revealed when everything else is taken away. And sometimes, the greatest blessing that comes from suffering is not the restoration that follows, but the deeper knowledge of God that is discovered along the way. If this story has helped you see the depth of Job's faith in a new way, consider supporting the channel so more people can discover these powerful biblical insights. Don't forget to subscribe and follow the channel for more stories, deep biblical analysis, and life-changing lessons from Scripture. Our new video explores truths that have inspired believers for thousands of years, and your support helps bring those messages to people around the world. And as the story of Job reminds us, even in the darkest moments of life, there may be a greater purpose unfolding. One that only becomes clear when we learn to trust the wisdom of God.